the doorbell camera captured everything in crisp 4K resolution. Every cruel laugh, every vindictive smile, every piece of Sophie Chen's life being hurled onto the wet November pavement like garbage. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m., and the footage would later become Exhibit A in a criminal case that would shock Seattle's elite social circles. But Sophie didn't know that yet. All she knew was that her phone was buzzing with motion alerts while she sat in her obstetrician's office, 7 months pregnant and waiting to hear her baby's heartbeat. All she knew was that something was very, very wrong at the house she'd called home for 4 years. "Mrs. Chen, your blood pressure is elevated," Dr. Patricia Kim said, frowning at the monitor. "Are you feeling stressed about anything?" Sophie's hand trembled as she opened the Ring app on her phone. The live feed showed a woman, tall, blonde, maybe 25, standing in her doorway wearing what looked suspiciously like Sophie's silk robe. The woman was laughing as she threw Sophie's maternity clothes into the rain. "I need to go," Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need to go right now." "Sophie, you can't leave in this condition. Your blood pressure is dangerously high." "We need to," but Sophie was already moving, her 7-month belly making her movements awkward and desperate. She grabbed her purse and waddled toward the door as fast as her swollen body would allow, ignoring Dr. Kim's protests about preeclampsia and hospital admission. The Uber driver kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror as she watched the doorbell footage on repeat. Each viewing made her stomach clench harder, made the baby inside her kick with what felt like shared outrage. The blonde woman, Crystal Martinez, Sophie would learn later, a 24-year-old influencer with 60,000 Instagram followers, was giving a performance for the camera. She'd found Sophie's wedding dress, the one that had cost $3,000 and represented months of careful saving from Sophie's museum curator salary. Crystal held it up, twirled with it, then threw it directly into a puddle. "This is what happens when you're boring," Crystal announced to the camera, apparently unaware it was recording. "When you let yourself go and can't keep your man interested. Marcus deserves better than some fat pregnant cow who can't even dress herself anymore." Sophie's breath caught. Marcus. Her husband. The man who'd held her hair back during morning sickness, who'd promised to love her forever, who'd seemed genuinely excited about becoming a father just 2 months ago. The Uber pulled up to their house, a modest 2-story in Ballard that they'd stretched to afford, and Sophie's worst fears crystallized into reality. Her belongings covered the front lawn like a garage sale no one wanted to attend. Maternity clothes, books, her grandmother's tea set, photograph albums, all scattered and rain-soaked. Crystal stood on the porch wearing Sophie's cashmere sweater over designer jeans Sophie had never seen before. She was filming everything on her phone, narrating like it was content for her social media empire. "And that's how you upgrade your life," Crystal was saying into her camera. "Out with the old baby mama, in with the new." Marcus finally realized he deserves a woman who takes care of herself, who has ambition, She'd spotted Sophie climbing out of the Uber, moving slowly, one hand on her belly and the other clutching her phone. Well, Crystal said, not bothering to stop filming. "The whale has returned to the beach." Sophie felt something crack inside her chest, but her voice came out steady. "Where's Marcus?" "Marcus is at work, making actual money while you've been playing house." Crystal descended the porch steps with the confidence of someone who believed she'd already won. "He told me to clear out your stuff. You have until 5 p.m. to get everything, and then we're changing the locks. This is my house." Sophie's hand tightened on her phone. "My name is on the deed." "Was on the deed, sweetie. Marcus had you removed last week. You just haven't checked the paperwork yet because you've been too busy eating for 12 instead of 2. The cruelty was almost impressive in its creativity. Sophie had gained 43 pounds during her pregnancy, exactly what Dr. Kim had recommended for someone of her height and pre-pregnancy weight. But Crystal made it sound like moral failure, like evidence of Sophie's unworthiness. "I want to talk to Marcus." "Marcus doesn't want to talk to you. That's why he hired me to do this." Crystal gestured at the scattered belongings with theatrical grandeur. "He's done, Sophie. He wants a divorce. He wants me." And honestly, can you blame him? Look at yourself. Sophie looked down at her swollen belly, at the maternity dress that Dr. Kim had complimented that morning, at her swollen ankles and the wedding ring that no longer fit her finger and now hung on a chain around her neck. Did Marcus send you here? Sophie asked quietly. Did he tell you to throw my things out? He gave me permission to make this house ready for our future together. I'm just being efficient. Crystal stepped closer, her phone still recording. You know what your problem is, Sophie? You thought being nice and sweet and boring was enough. But Marcus needs excitement. He needs passion. He needs someone who knows how to please a man, not someone who waddles around complaining about back pain and swollen feet. I'm 7 months pregnant with his child. A child he never wanted. He told me all about how you baby-trapped him, how you pretended to be on birth control when you weren't. How you manipulated him into this whole situation. Crystal's smile was sharp enough to cut. But don't worry, Marcus is going to do the right thing. He'll pay child support. You'll be fine living in whatever sad little apartment you can afford on your pathetic museum salary. Sophie's hand moved to her belly instinctively, protectively. The baby kicked hard, as if responding to the tension in her voice. You're filming this? Of course I'm filming this. My followers love drama. Watch me help my boyfriend evict his ex is going to get amazing engagement. Crystal checked her phone screen, adjusting the angle. Plus, when you try to cause problems later, I'll have proof that I gave you plenty of time to collect your stuff. Very civilized of me, really. Something cold settled in Sophie's stomach. Not panic, she'd moved past panic into a strange calm that felt almost like floating. I see. And you're comfortable with all of this being recorded? Why wouldn't I be? I'm not doing anything wrong. Marcus owns this house, I'm his girlfriend, and you're trespassing. Crystal's confidence was absolute, unshakable. Now, are you going to gather your garbage or do I need to call the police to remove you? Actually, Sophie said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, I think calling the police is an excellent idea. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911 while Crystal watched with amused contempt. 911, what's your emergency? My name is Sophie Chen. I'm 7 months pregnant, and someone has broken into my home and is throwing my belongings onto the street. I have video evidence of the crime in progress. I'm at 4782, Meridian Avenue North. Crystal's smile faltered slightly. Broken in? I have a key. Marcus gave it to me. Did Marcus give you permission to destroy my property and throw it into the rain? Sophie asked calmly, still speaking into the phone. Because my doorbell camera has been recording everything for the past 45 minutes. The color drained from Crystal's face as she finally understood what Sophie had been doing. The doorbell camera, the Ring device Marcus had installed last year for security, had captured everything. Every cruel word, every thrown item, every admission that Marcus had hired her to do this. I was just joking around, Crystal stammered, her influencer confidence evaporating. Ma'am, officers are on their way, the 911 dispatcher said. Are you in immediate danger? I don't think so. The woman who broke in is still here, and she's currently wearing my clothing. Crystal looked down at the cashmere sweater in horror. I wasn't stealing. Marcus said I could borrow, officers are 2 minutes out, the dispatcher confirmed. Please stay on the line. Sophie stayed on the line. She stood on her own front lawn, surrounded by her rain-soaked belongings, her hand on her pregnant belly, and waited. Crystal tried to leave 3 times, but Sophie calmly informed her that fleeing a crime scene would only make things worse. When the police cruiser pulled up, Crystal had her phone out, trying to delete the video she'd recorded. Sophie still had hers up, showing the 911 dispatcher the live doorbell footage of Crystal rifling through boxes and throwing more items onto the lawn. Officer Jessica Martinez, no relation to Crystal, she would later emphasize, stepped out of the cruiser with the expression of someone who'd seen everything and was surprised by nothing. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away from the property, she said to Crystal. I have permission to be here. This is my boyfriend's house. And the pregnant woman? Officer Martinez nodded toward Sophie. What's her story? She's the ex-wife. She's trespassing. Actually, Sophie said quietly, pulling documents from her purse with shaking hands, I'm the current wife. We're not divorced yet. And this house is in my name, as you can see from this deed. Officer Martinez examined the paperwork while her partner, Officer Davis, began walking the perimeter of the property, documenting the scattered belongings with his body camera. Ms. Martinez, Officer Martinez said to Crystal, her tone shifting into professional coldness, do you have documentation showing you have permission to be on this property? Marcus gave me a key. He told me to clear out her stuff because we're moving in together. Marcus being Marcus Chen, the husband? Officer Martinez looked at Sophie, who nodded. And do you have written permission from Mrs. Chen, the property owner, to be here? Crystal's mouth opened and closed without sound. Furthermore, I can see items scattered across the lawn that appear to have been thrown from inside the residence. Can you explain that? I was just helping Marcus. He wanted her stuff out. So you admit to removing items from the residence without the owner's permission? Sophie watched Crystal's face as the reality of her situation finally penetrated. The younger woman's confidence had evaporated completely, replaced by panic that made her look even younger than her 24 years. I want to show you something, Sophie said to Officer Martinez, pulling up the Ring app on her phone. My doorbell camera has been recording for the past hour. What followed was a surreal experience as 3 police officers crowded around Sophie's phone, watching Crystal's performance. The audio was crystal clear, every insult, every admission, every moment of Crystal narrating her content creation while destroying someone's property. That's destruction of property, criminal trespass, and possibly theft, Officer Martinez said grimly. Ms. Martinez, you're under arrest. What? No. I didn't do anything wrong. Marcus told me to. Marcus Chen doesn't have legal authority to permit anyone to destroy his wife's property or remove it without her consent. Regardless of what he told you, you committed multiple crimes, and you filmed yourself doing it. Officer Martinez was pulling out her handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Sophie watched Crystal being arrested in her own driveway, and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a strange numbness that probably meant she was in shock. Her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Mrs. Chen? This is Robert Morrison from Morrison & Associates law firm. I'm calling on behalf of your late grandmother, Catherine Zhao. Sophie's world tilted. Her grandmother had died 3 weeks ago, peacefully in her sleep at 87. Sophie had been too pregnant and grief-stricken to do more than attend the simple funeral, hadn't even thought about estate matters. I'm sorry, this isn't a good time, Sophie said, watching Crystal being loaded into the police cruiser while still protesting her innocence. I understand, but this is time-sensitive. Your grandmother left specific instructions that you were to be contacted immediately upon her death, but we've been having trouble reaching you. Mrs. Chen, your grandmother's estate is valued at approximately $700 million, and you're the sole beneficiary. Sophie sat down on her wet lawn because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. $700 million. Crystal was screaming from the police car about Marcus, about lawyers, about how this was all a misunderstanding. $700 million. Officer Martinez was asking Sophie questions about pressing charges, about restraining orders, about whether she felt safe staying in the house. $700 million. Mrs. Chen? Are you still there? Yes, Sophie whispered. I'm here. We need to schedule a meeting as soon as possible. Your grandmother's assets include several properties, investment portfolios, a controlling stake in Zhao Technologies, and various other holdings. There are also specific instructions she left regarding your current situation. My current situation? Your grandmother was quite thorough in her planning. She left detailed notes indicating she was concerned about your marriage and wanted to ensure you were protected. She hired private investigators, Mrs. Chen. She knew about your husband's affair with Ms. Martinez. She knew about his plans to divorce you. And she made provisions. Sophie's hand tightened on her phone. What kind of provisions? I'd prefer to discuss that in person. But Mrs. Chen, your grandmother was a very strategic woman. Everything that's happened today, I suspect she anticipated much of it. Can you come to our office tomorrow morning? Sophie looked at her rain-soaked belongings, at the police officers documenting everything, at the house she thought was her home. Yes. I'll be there. After hanging up, Sophie stood slowly, her hand on her belly. The baby was kicking steadily now, as if sensing that everything was about to change. Officer Martinez approached with a gentle expression. Mrs. Chen, I need to ask, do you want to press charges against Ms. Martinez? Yes, Sophie said without hesitation. For everything. I want every charge you can file. That would be criminal trespass, malicious mischief, and theft. Possibly harassment depending on what else is on that video. Officer Martinez paused. There's also the matter of your husband. If he directed Ms. Martinez to do this, he could face charges as well. Sophie thought about Marcus. Her husband of 4 years. The man whose baby was currently doing somersaults in her belly. The man who'd apparently hired his mistress to throw his pregnant wife's belongings into the street. Let's start with her, Sophie said. Marcus and I will have our own conversation. As if summoned by his name, a black BMW pulled into the driveway. Marcus Chen emerged looking exactly like the successful tech consultant he was, designer suit, expensive watch, the confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for anything. He froze when he saw the police cruiser, the officers, Crystal's tear-stained face visible through the car window. Sophie? What the hell is going on? Sophie watched her husband, this man she'd loved enough to marry, to build a life with, to create a child with, and felt something inside her chest turn to ice. Marcus Chen? Officer Martinez stepped forward. I'm going to need to speak with you about your involvement in today's events. My involvement? I was at work. What events? But his eyes were darting between Sophie and Crystal, calculating, already building his defense. We have video evidence suggesting you instructed Ms. Martinez to remove property from this residence without your wife's permission. That's ridiculous. Crystal must have misunderstood. I would never, Sophie, you have to believe me. I had no idea she was going to do this. Sophie pulled up the ring footage and held out her phone. She said you hired her. She said you gave her permission. She said you wanted me out by 5 p.m. Marcus's face went pale as he watched Crystal's performance. His mistress, his girlfriend, his upgrade, cheerfully narrating her crimes while wearing Sophie's clothes. That's taken out of context. She's exaggerating. Sophie, please, we can work this out. This is all just a big misunderstanding. Is it a misunderstanding that you're having an affair with her? The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Sophie, I was going to tell you. I was trying to find the right time. Is it a misunderstanding that you tried to remove my name from the deed to our house? Marcus's eyes widened. How did you? Is it a misunderstanding that you're planning to divorce me while I'm 7 months pregnant with your child? Sophie, if you would just listen, no. Sophie's voice was quiet but absolute. I'm done listening, Marcus. I'm done being understanding. I'm done making excuses for you. I'm done. Officer Martinez cleared her throat. Mr. Chen, I'm going to need you to come down to the station to give a statement about your relationship with Ms. Martinez and what instructions you may have given her regarding this property. I want my lawyer. That's your right, sir. But understand that we have extensive video evidence, and Ms. Martinez has already made several statements implicating you in conspiracy to commit criminal trespass and destruction of property. Sophie watched Marcus's face cycle through emotions, anger, fear, calculation, and finally, the cold pragmatism she'd seen him use in business negotiations. This was Marcus in survival mode, cutting losses, protecting himself. Sophie, he said, his tone shifting to something softer, more pleading. Please. Think about our baby. Think about our family. We can fix this. Our baby? Sophie's hand moved to her belly. The baby you told Crystal you never wanted? The baby she said I used to trap you? I never said that. She's lying. She's trying to cause problems between us. Marcus, I have it on video. Her own video that she was recording for her Instagram followers. She quoted you directly. Marcus's jaw clenched. She's mentally unstable. She's obsessed with me. I tried to break up with her last week, and she threatened to hurt herself. I was trying to handle it delicately, Mr. Chen. Officer Martinez interrupted. You can provide your statement at the station. Right now, I need you to step aside and let us finish processing this scene. As Marcus was escorted to give his statement, as Crystal's cries faded into the distance, as neighbors began emerging to gawk at the spectacle, Sophie stood in her ruined front yard and felt the baby kick. $700 million, she thought. Her grandmother's legacy. The safety net she'd never known existed. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Chen, this is David Park from Morrison and Associates. Mr. Morrison asked me to inform you that we've arranged temporary security for your residence and prepare a hotel suite for you if you'd prefer not to stay at the house tonight. We can have someone collect you within the hour. Please let us know how you'd like to proceed. Sophie looked at her house, the house she'd carefully decorated, the nursery she'd painted herself, the home where she'd imagined raising her child. It all felt contaminated now, poisoned by Crystal's presence and Marcus's betrayal. She texted back, "Hotel, please. I'll pack a bag." As she climbed the porch steps, Officer Martinez stopped her. "Mrs. Chen, we're going to need to document everything inside as well. This is a crime scene." "Of course. I'll wait." Sophie waited on her own porch while strangers photographed her violated home. She waited while they catalogued every item Crystal had touched, every drawer she'd rifled through, every space she'd contaminated. She waited while the November rain continued falling, soaking her scattered belongings, washing away any pretense that her old life still existed. When they finally let her inside to pack, Sophie moved through the house like a ghost. The bedroom she'd shared with Marcus smelled like perfume she didn't recognize. Crystal's makeup was scattered across Sophie's vanity. There were clothes in the closet Sophie had never seen before, tiny dresses and 6-inch heels that made Sophie's practical flats look tragic by comparison. In the kitchen, she found champagne flutes in the sink. 2 of them. Crystal and Marcus had been celebrating something. Probably her eviction. Sophie packed mechanically. Maternity clothes, toiletries, the few pieces of jewelry her grandmother had given her over the years. She packed the ultrasound photos from her last appointment, the baby name book she and Marcus had been reading together, the tiny onesie that said Daddy's little coder that Marcus had bought with such genuine joy. Or had that joy been genuine? How much of her marriage had been real, and how much had been performance? Her phone rang. Unknown number again. "Mrs. Chen, this is Jennifer from Morrison and Associates. Your car will be there in 5 minutes. I wanted to give you the hotel information and confirm tomorrow's appointment at 10 a.m. Thank you," Sophie said, her voice hollow. "Mrs. Chen, Mr. Morrison asked me to tell you something else. He said your grandmother left you a letter to be opened only after," Jennifer's voice faltered. "Only after you'd experienced betrayal." She was very specific about the timing. Sophie sank onto the bed where she'd slept beside Marcus for 4 years, where she'd conceived their child, where Crystal had apparently made herself comfortable. "A letter?" "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Morrison has it in his office. He said your grandmother wrote it 3 years ago, shortly after your wedding. She apparently had concerns even then." After hanging up, Sophie let herself feel it finally. The grief, the rage, the overwhelming sense of loss. She cried for the marriage that had never been what she thought it was. She cried for her grandmother, who'd known her husband was unworthy and had prepared for this moment. She cried for the baby who would grow up in a broken home. But underneath the tears, something else was building. Something harder and colder and infinitely more powerful than grief. Marcus had made a critical error. He'd assumed that Sophie was powerless, that her modest salary and gentle nature meant she had no resources, no options, no ability to fight back. Crystal had assumed the same thing, had treated her with contempt because she seemed weak and vulnerable. They'd both forgotten that quiet waters run deep. The black sedan arrived exactly on time, driven by a professional who introduced himself as James and handled her bags with the kind of deference Sophie had never experienced. The hotel suite was in downtown Seattle, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay and more square footage than her entire house. "Mr. Morrison's office has arranged for a private chef if you'd like dinner sent up," James said. "And there's a 24-hour security detail in the lobby. You're completely safe here, Mrs. Chen." After he left, Sophie stood at the window and watched the city lights blur through her tears. Her phone kept buzzing, Marcus calling, texting, leaving voicemails that progressed from apologetic to angry to desperate. She didn't answer any of them. Instead, she opened her laptop and began documenting everything. Every text message from Marcus over the past 6 months, carefully examining them for evidence of deception. Every credit card statement, looking for hotel charges and jewelry purchases she'd never received. Every moment of their marriage that suddenly looked different when viewed through the lens of betrayal. She downloaded all the Ring camera footage, backed it up to 3 different cloud services, and sent copies to Officer Martinez and to Morrison and Associates. She called her best friend, Michelle, who'd been her roommate in graduate school and was now a civil rights attorney in Portland. "Sophie? It's midnight. Is everything okay?" "No," Sophie said simply. "Nothing is okay. But I need your help." She told Michelle everything: Crystal, Marcus, the arrest, the inheritance. Michelle listened without interrupting, and when Sophie finished, there was a long silence. "Sophie, I'm getting in my car right now. I'll be there in 3 hours. You don't have to. $700 million and a cheating husband who hired his mistress to throw you out of your own house while you're pregnant? Sophie, I'm getting in my car. This isn't negotiable." After midnight, Sophie finally allowed herself to look at Marcus's voicemails. She needed to know what kind of defense he was building, what story he was telling himself to justify what he'd done. The first one was apologetic. "Sophie, I'm so sorry. I know how this looks, but I can explain everything. Crystal was just helping me with a surprise. I was planning to renovate the nursery, and I asked her to help clear out some old furniture. She completely misunderstood and took it too far. Please call me back so we can talk about this." The second was defensive. "Sophie, the police are saying I could be charged with crimes. That's insane. I never told Crystal to throw your stuff out. She's clearly unstable. I was trying to help her because she was going through a tough time, and this is how she repays me? By making me look like the bad guy? You know me, Sophie. You know I would never hurt you intentionally." The third was angry. "You're really going to let them arrest Crystal? She made a mistake, Sophie. She's young and stupid, but she doesn't deserve to have her life ruined over this. And now the police want to question me like I'm some kind of criminal? I've been working 16-hour days to support us, to save for the baby, and this is the thanks I get? A police investigation?" The fourth was calculating. "Sophie, we need to think about this practically. If Crystal gets convicted, it could affect my career. My clients won't want to work with someone connected to a criminal case. We need to make this go away, drop the charges, settle privately, move forward. I'm willing to go to counseling. We can fix our marriage if you'll just give me a chance." The fifth was desperate. "Sophie, please. I love you. I made mistakes, but I love you and our baby. Don't throw away 4 years of marriage over one stupid error in judgment. Call me. Please just call me." There was no mention of the affair. No acknowledgement that he'd been planning to divorce her. No admission of any wrongdoing beyond poor communication with Crystal. Marcus was already rewriting history, transforming himself from betrayer to victim. Sophie deleted all the messages and blocked his number. At 2 a.m., she finally allowed herself to think about the baby. 7 months along, with a due date in late January. A boy, according to the ultrasound. A boy who would grow up knowing his father had tried to throw his mother onto the street. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling the steady kicks of her son. "It's just us now," she whispered. "But we're going to be okay. Better than okay. Your great-grandmother made sure of that." The next morning, Sophie woke to find Michelle standing over her bed with coffee and bagels from a bakery down the street. "You look terrible," Michelle said bluntly. She was 34 like Sophie, but carried herself with the aggressive confidence of someone who'd spent a decade fighting discrimination lawsuits. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore a suit that screamed, "I will destroy you in court." "I feel terrible," Sophie admitted, struggling to sit up around her pregnant belly. "Good. Use that. We're going to channel all of that pain into making Chen wish he'd treated you better." Michelle sat on the bed and pulled out her laptop. "I spent the drive up researching Washington state community property law. The house is yours. Your name on the deed means Marcus can't touch it without your consent. The attempted deed removal is fraud, by the way. We'll be pursuing that. I don't want to fight him, Michelle. I just want this to be over." "Too bad. You're fighting whether you want to or not, because Marcus is going to try to screw you in the divorce. That's what men like him do. They cheat, they get caught, and then they punish their wives for having the audacity to be heard about it." Michelle's voice was sharp with experience. "But we're not going to let that happen. We have leverage now." "The inheritance?" "The inheritance, the video evidence of Crystal's crime spree, the adultery, the attempted property fraud. Sophie, we have everything. Marcus is going to settle fast and generous, or we're going to bury him." At 10 a.m., they arrived at Morrison & Associates, a law firm that occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise. Robert Morrison himself met them in the lobby, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes. "Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry for your loss. Your grandmother was an extraordinary woman." "Thank you," Sophie said, her throat tight. "I still can't believe she's gone. She spoke of you constantly. Her brilliant granddaughter, the art historian, the one who chose passion over profit." Robert smiled gently. "She was very proud of you." He led them to a conference room where documents were spread across a massive table. Michelle's eyes widened as she scanned the paperwork. "Holy shit, Sophie. This isn't just an inheritance. This is an empire." Robert nodded. Catherine Zhao was the founder and CEO of Zhao Technologies, one of the largest semiconductor manufacturers in Asia. She was also a significant investor in American tech companies, including, he paused significantly, including Chen Consulting Group. Sophie froze. "Marcus's company?" "Your husband's consulting firm handles several clients who are dependent on Zhao Technologies for components. Your grandmother held considerable leverage over those client relationships. She made some very specific provisions in her will regarding that leverage." He pulled out a letter, yellowed with age but carefully preserved. Sophie's name was written on the envelope in her grandmother's distinctive handwriting. "She wrote this 3 years ago, shortly after your wedding. She asked that I give it to you only after you'd experienced what she called the inevitable betrayal." Robert's expression was grave. "Your grandmother hired private investigators to monitor your marriage, Mrs. Chen. She knew about Marcus's affair 6 months ago. She knew about Crystal Martinez. She knew about his plans to divorce you." "She knew?" Sophie's voice cracked. "Why didn't she tell me?" "Because she wanted you to make your own choices. But she also wanted to ensure you had options when you finally discovered the truth." Robert slid the letter across the table. "Perhaps this will explain better than I can." Sophie opened the envelope with shaking hands. Her grandmother's handwriting blurred through her tears as she read, "My dearest Sophie, if you're reading this, then Marcus has shown you who he truly is. I'm so sorry, my darling girl. I wish I could have spared you this pain. I knew within 6 months of your wedding that Marcus Chen married you for the wrong reasons. He saw a gentle, educated woman from a modest background, or so he thought. He saw someone he could control, someone who would make him look good, someone who would never challenge his ambitions. He never bothered to look deeper. He never asked about your family. He never wondered why I lived in such a simple apartment or why I never discussed my work. He assumed I was just a retired accountant, nothing more. You never corrected him because you wanted to be loved for yourself, not for my money. I understood that. I respected it. But I also prepared for it to end badly. I've spent the last 3 years building failsafes to protect you. Chen Consulting's biggest clients are dependent on relationships I've carefully cultivated. If Marcus tries to minimize your settlement or deny you what you deserve, those relationships will evaporate. I've made certain of that. The money I'm leaving you isn't just wealth, Sophie. It's power. It's the power to choose your own path, to protect your child, to never be vulnerable again. Use it wisely. Use it ruthlessly if you must. But use it to build a life worthy of the incredible woman you are. You are stronger than you know. You are fiercer than Marcus ever suspected. Show him what happens when someone underestimates a Zhao woman. All my love. Grandmother Sophie read the letter 3 times, her hand on her belly, tears streaming down her face. Michelle read over her shoulder, and when she finished, she let out a low whistle. Your grandmother was a savage. I would have loved to meet her. Robert cleared his throat. Mrs. Chen, there are some immediate decisions to make. Your grandmother's will includes provisions for your housing, your child's future, and your security. But there's also the matter of Marcus. What about him? Your grandmother held a 20% stake in Chen Consulting through a series of shell companies. Marcus has no idea that his firm's second largest investor was his mother-in-law. As of this morning, those shares are yours. Sophie stared at him. I own 20% of Marcus's company? Yes. Which means you have significant leverage in divorce proceedings. If Marcus tries to lowball you on settlement, we can make things very difficult for his business. Robert's smile was sharp. Your grandmother was quite thorough in her planning. Michelle was already making notes. We need to file for divorce immediately. We need to secure restraining orders against both Marcus and Crystal. We need to freeze joint accounts and file police reports about the attempted property fraud. And we need to make it very clear to Marcus that this is not going to be an easy split. The next 3 weeks were a blur of lawyers, police statements, and strategic maneuvering. Crystal was formally charged with criminal trespass, malicious mischief, and theft. The doorbell camera footage went viral after someone leaked it to local news stations. Apparently Crystal's Instagram followers turned out to be excellent sources for journalists looking for content. The video of Crystal in Sophie's clothes, throwing her belongings into the rain, insulting her appearance in her pregnancy, became a social media sensation. Mistress arrested after doorbell cam captures attack on pregnant wife was trending for 3 days. Crystal's Instagram account was flooded with comments calling her every name imaginable. Her follower count plummeted. Brands she'd partnered with dropped her overnight. Marcus tried to distance himself, releasing a statement through his publicist, I'm horrified by Ms. Martinez's actions and had no knowledge of her plans to harass my wife. I've cooperated fully with police and hope Sophie can find it in her heart to forgive this terrible misunderstanding. But Sophie's lawyers released the full doorbell footage, all 60 minutes of it, including the segments where Crystal explicitly stated that Marcus had hired her to clear out the house. Marcus's carefully constructed defense crumbled under the weight of Crystal's own recorded words. Chen Consulting lost 3 major clients within 2 weeks. Marcus's business partners scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss leadership concerns. His reputation in Seattle's tight-knit tech community suffered irreparable damage. And through it all, Sophie remained silent. She didn't give interviews. She didn't post on social media. She simply let Marcus destroy himself while she prepared for her new life. At 32 weeks pregnant, Sophie signed divorce papers that gave her everything: the house, full custody of their unborn child, significant child support, and half of Marcus's retirement accounts. Marcus signed without argument, his lawyers having explained very clearly what would happen to his business if Sophie exercised her voting rights as a 20% shareholder. Crystal pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for probation and restitution. She paid Sophie $15,000 for damaged property and issued a public apology that her lawyer had clearly written. Sophie accepted the apology with grace and then never thought about Crystal Martinez again. 6 weeks before her due date, Sophie moved out of the Ballard house and into a penthouse in downtown Seattle that her grandmother had owned for 20 years. The views were spectacular, the security was impeccable, and every room felt like a fresh start. Michelle helped her decorate the nursery, choosing soft blues and greens instead of the aggressive primary colors Marcus had wanted. Sophie's new lawyer, a family law specialist named Patricia Chen, no relation to Marcus, helped her establish trusts for the baby and organize her inheritance into manageable portfolios. And every night, Sophie would stand at her penthouse windows, watching the city lights reflect off Elliott Bay, one hand on her growing belly, and feel something she hadn't felt in months: peace. Marcus tried to contact her several times, emails that progressed from self-pitying to bitter to finally, reluctantly, accepting. "I never meant to hurt you," his final email read. "I made terrible choices, and I'll regret them for the rest of my life. I hope someday you can forgive me. I hope our son can know me. But I understand if that's not possible. I'm sorry, Sophie. For everything." Sophie read the email once and then archived it without responding. Some apologies came too late to matter. On January 15th, during one of Seattle's rare snow days, Sophie's water broke 3 weeks early. Michelle drove her to the hospital, coaching her breathing while navigating icy streets with the aggressive confidence of someone who'd litigated her way through worse challenges. Labor lasted 14 hours. Sophie thought about her grandmother, who'd gone through this alone in Shanghai in 1936, who'd built an empire while raising a child as a single mother. She thought about all the Zhao women before her, who'd survived wars and revolutions and heartbreak to pass their strength down through generations. When her son finally arrived at 3:47 a.m. on January 16, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and his great-grandmother's determined chin, Sophie held him and felt something fundamental shift in her chest. "Ethan James Zhao," she whispered, using her grandmother's maiden name instead of Chen. "You're going to change the world, little one." The nurse took photos, Sophie holding her newborn, exhausted and radiant. Michelle sent the photos to Sophie's new lawyer, who would file them as part of the custody agreement. Marcus had waived his right to be present at the birth after Sophie made it clear he wasn't welcome. He showed up anyway, 6 hours after Ethan's birth, looking haggard and desperate. "Sophie, please. He's my son. Let me see him." Sophie looked at her ex-husband, this man who'd thrown her away like garbage, who'd hired his mistress to erase her from her own home, who'd valued his freedom over his family, and felt nothing but distant pity. "You can see him. The custody agreement allows supervised visitation." Her voice was pleasant, professional. "Call my lawyer to schedule a time. I don't want supervised visits. I want to be his father. You should have thought about that before you tried to evict us from our home." Sophie adjusted Ethan in her arms, his tiny face peaceful in sleep. "You made your choices, Marcus. Now you get to live with them. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. How many times do I have to say it? You didn't make a mistake. You made a series of calculated decisions to prioritize your comfort over your family. That's not a mistake. That's a character flaw." Sophie met his eyes steadily. "And I'm protecting my son from having to learn that the hard way." Marcus's face crumpled. "Sophie, please. I love you. I want us to be a family. You had a family. You threw it away for a 24-year-old Instagram influencer who's now dealing with a criminal record. Those were your priorities." Sophie pressed the call button for the nurse. "I think it's time for you to leave. You can't keep me from my son. I'm not keeping you from him. I'm requiring that your visits be supervised by a third party until Ethan is old enough to tell me if he feels safe with you." That's my right as his custodial parent. It's also what the court agreed to when you signed the settlement. The nurse arrived with security in tow. Marcus was escorted from the maternity ward, still protesting, still convinced that the right words would somehow undo everything he'd destroyed. That afternoon, Sophie's hospital room filled with flowers from people she didn't know, board members from Zhao Technologies, business partners her grandmother had cultivated, friends from her grandmother's Shanghai days who sent messages of condolence and congratulation in equal measure. Patricia Chen visited with paperwork, final divorce documents, custody agreements, and incorporation papers for a charitable foundation Sophie had decided to establish in her grandmother's name. The Zhao Foundation for Women and Children, Patricia read. Supporting victims of domestic violence, helping single mothers, funding education for disadvantaged girls. Sophie, this is beautiful. My grandmother used her wealth to protect me when I was vulnerable. I want to do the same for others. Sophie looked down at Ethan, sleeping peacefully against her chest. No woman should have to feel as powerless as I did that day on my front lawn. Michelle arrived with champagne, non-alcoholic for Sophie, and raised a toast. To Catherine Zhao, who built an empire. To Sophie Zhao, who's building a legacy. And to Ethan, who won the genetic lottery by getting Zhao DNA instead of Chen mediocrity. Sophie laughed, and it felt good. It felt like healing. 6 months later, Sophie stood in the conference room at Morrison & Associates, addressing the board of directors for Zhao Technologies via video conference. Ethan slept in a carrier on her chest, occasionally making small sounds that caused hardened executives to smile despite themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proposing we expand our manufacturing capacity in Vietnam while reducing dependence on volatile supply chains. My grandmother began this process 5 years ago, but I believe we can accelerate the timeline. She walked them through projections, supply chain analysis, and market forecasts with the confidence of someone who'd spent 6 months learning her grandmother's business from the ground up. The board members, most of whom had doubted that a museum curator could run a technology empire, nodded with growing respect. After the meeting, Robert Morrison approached with a satisfied smile. Your grandmother would be very proud, Sophie. You've exceeded everyone's expectations. I had good teachers. Sophie adjusted Ethan in his carrier. Grandmother's files were very thorough. Almost like she was preparing me for this. She was. Catherine knew she wouldn't live forever. She wanted to ensure the company passed to someone who understood that profit wasn't the only measure of success. That evening, as Sophie fed Ethan in her penthouse nursery, watching the sun set over Elliott Bay, she thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Pregnant, powerless, watching her belongings scattered across her lawn while her husband's mistress laughed. She thought about how terror and humiliation had transformed into strategy and strength. She thought about her grandmother's letter, about the legacy of fierce women who refused to be broken by men who underestimated them. Her phone buzzed with a news alert: Chen consulting files for bankruptcy after losing major contracts. The article detailed Marcus's business failures, the clients who'd abandoned him, the reputation damage that had proven insurmountable. Sophie felt no satisfaction in his downfall. She'd learned that revenge was less sweet than simply living well, than building something meaningful with the resources her grandmother had provided. Marcus's supervised visits with Ethan happened every other Saturday. He'd show up at the neutral location looking tired and diminished, would hold his son for 2 hours while a social worker observed, and would leave looking even more defeated. Ethan seemed to tolerate these visits with infant indifference, showing no particular attachment to either parent yet. Crystal Martinez had moved to Portland and was working as a dental receptionist, her influencer dreams having evaporated along with her follower count. She'd sent Sophie a letter 6 months after the arrest, attempting to apologize again and explain that she'd been young and stupid and Marcus had manipulated her. Sophie read the letter once and then shredded it. Crystal had made her choices, too. Everyone involved had made choices, and now everyone was living with the consequences. On Ethan's first birthday, Sophie hosted a party at her penthouse. Michelle was there with her wife, Patricia Kim came with her twin daughters, and several board members from Zhao Technologies brought their families. It was a celebration of life, of survival, of the future Sophie was building for her son. Marcus was not invited. He'd sent a gift, an expensive educational toy that seemed chosen more for show than for a one-year-old's enjoyment. Sophie donated it to a children's hospital. As the party wound down and Ethan demolished his first birthday cake with enthusiastic abandon, Michelle pulled Sophie aside. "You know he's going to come back, right? Marcus. Once his business recovers, once enough time has passed, he's going to try again." "Let him try," Sophie said calmly. "I'm not the woman he married anymore, Michelle. I'm not vulnerable, and I'm not afraid. If he wants to be part of Ethan's life in a meaningful way, he'll have to earn it. And I don't think Marcus knows how to earn anything that can't be bought or manipulated." "You're really okay? After everything?" Sophie looked around her penthouse, at the friends celebrating with her, at her healthy son wearing birthday cake like war paint, at the life she'd built from the ashes of betrayal. "I'm more than okay. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." 2 years after that day on her front lawn, Sophie stood in a Seattle courtroom watching Crystal Martinez being sentenced for violating her probation. Apparently, Crystal had attempted to contact Marcus, violating the restraining order Sophie had obtained on his behalf after Crystal had started sending threatening messages. The judge was not sympathetic. Crystal received 30 days in jail and extended probation. Sophie didn't attend the sentencing, but Patricia Chen sent her updates. "She's still blaming you for ruining her life," Patricia reported. "Apparently, she's convinced that if you'd just dropped the charges, everything would have been fine." "Some people never take responsibility for their own actions," Sophie replied, not particularly interested. She had more important things to focus on. The Zhao Foundation had opened 3 women's shelters in the Seattle area. Her position on the Zhao Technologies board had proven surprisingly fulfilling. She'd discovered a talent for strategic planning that had lain dormant during her museum curator days. And Ethan, at nearly 3 years old, was showing signs of his great-grandmother's formidable intelligence. He'd started speaking in full sentences at 18 months and was currently obsessed with numbers and patterns. Marcus's supervised visits had been upgraded to unsupervised after 2 years of consistent attendance and good behavior. He'd rebuilt his consulting business on a smaller scale, had started therapy, and had apparently learned some humility from his catastrophic fall from grace. He would never be Sophie's partner again. That door had closed and locked the day Crystal threw her belongings into the rain. But he could be Ethan's father, could have a relationship with his son that was built on consistency and respect rather than biology alone. On a Tuesday afternoon in March, 5 years after the doorbell camera footage that had changed everything, Sophie received an unexpected visitor at her office. Crystal Martinez stood in the reception area looking nothing like the confident influencer who'd worn Sophie's clothes and laughed while destroying her life. She was thinner, older somehow, wearing a cheap suit and carrying herself with the defeated posture of someone who'd lost everything. "Mrs. Zhao," she said quietly when Sophie agreed to see her. "Thank you for meeting with me. I know you have no reason to." "Why are you here, Crystal?" "To apologize." "Really apologize, not the court-ordered version my lawyer wrote." Crystal's voice shook. "I destroyed your life for Instagram content. I treated you like garbage because I thought you were weak and boring and beneath me. I was cruel for no reason except that it made me feel powerful." Sophie studied the woman who'd once called her a whale, who'd thrown her maternity clothes into puddles, who'd celebrated evicting her from her own home. "Go on." "I've been in therapy for 3 years. Court-ordered at first, but then I kept going because I realized I was a terrible person. I built my whole identity around being pretty and desirable and better than other women. When I lost that, when everyone saw who I really was, I had nothing left. And you think apologizing will give you something back?" "No." Crystal's eyes filled with tears. "I know you'll never forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me either. But my therapist said I needed to try, needed to take responsibility for what I did. So I'm here to say that you didn't deserve any of it. You were a good person going through pregnancy, and I treated you with cruelty because I could. Because Marcus let me. Because I thought there would be no consequences. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. You were 24 years old and having an affair with a married man whose wife was pregnant. You filmed yourself committing crimes for social media engagement. You showed no remorse until you were caught and punished. Why should I believe you've changed? You shouldn't. You have no reason to trust anything I say. Crystal wiped her eyes. But I needed you to know that I understand now. I understand what I took from you that day. Your sense of safety, your trust in your marriage, your peace of mind. I can never give those back, but I can at least acknowledge that I took them. Is Marcus paying you to be here? God, no. Marcus and I haven't spoken in 4 years. He made it very clear that I ruined his life, and he wanted nothing to do with me. Crystal's laugh was bitter. Turns out we were both terrible people who deserved each other. He just got to pretend he was the victim while I became the villain. Sophie thought about the doorbell footage, about Crystal's performance for the camera, about the cheerful cruelty that had seemed so natural to her. You're right that I won't forgive you. You're right that what you did was unforgivable. But I appreciate you coming here and taking responsibility. Sophie stood, signaling the meeting was over. I hope you've genuinely changed, Crystal. I hope you've learned that other people's pain isn't content for your entertainment. I have. I promise I have. Crystal stood as well. Your son, is he okay? Is he healthy? My son is none of your concern. Right. Of course. I'm sorry. Crystal moved toward the door, then paused. Mrs. Zhao? The woman you are now, strong, powerful, successful, you would have become her anyway, wouldn't you? Even if Marcus had never cheated, even if I'd never shown up. You were always going to be extraordinary. Sophie thought about her grandmother's letter, about the $700 million she'd never known existed, about the empire she'd been born to inherit. Yes, she said simply. I was. You and Marcus just accelerated the timeline. After Crystal left, Sophie stood at her office window overlooking Seattle's skyline. Somewhere out there, Marcus was meeting with clients, rebuilding his reputation one contract at a time. Somewhere, Crystal was trying to become a better person, carrying the weight of her mistakes like stones in her pockets. And Sophie was here, in her corner office at Zhao Technologies, preparing for a board meeting where she'd propose a major expansion into renewable energy technology. She was raising her son to be kind but strong, generous but wise. She was honoring her grandmother's legacy while building her own. The doorbell camera footage that had started everything was now used in domestic violence prevention training, teaching people to recognize signs of abuse and encouraging victims to document evidence. Sophie had made the video available for free to organizations working to protect women and children. Her story had become a cautionary tale about underestimating quiet strength, about the consequences of cruelty, about the power of women who refused to be broken by men who thought they were disposable. And every year on the anniversary of that terrible day, Sophie would watch the footage one time. Not for revenge or vindication, but as a reminder of how far she'd come. She'd watch Crystal throwing her belongings into the rain, watch herself standing on that lawn 7 months pregnant and shaking with shock, watch the moment when her old life ended and her new one began. Then she'd close the video, delete the viewing history, and return to building the future her grandmother had made possible. Some women got revenge. Some got justice. Sophie Zhao had gotten both, along with something far more valuable, she'd gotten herself back. And that, she'd learned, was worth more than any inheritance, more than any settlement, more than any apology from people who'd shown their true colors too late to matter. She was a Zhao woman. And Zhao women didn't just survive betrayal, they transformed it into empire.